Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, articles, videos, notes, whatever you've got, and really try to figure out what matters most.
That's the goal.
Today, we're jumping into some pretty intense claims. We've got a source video called "This is Worse Than We Thought," and also an analysis of that video.
Right, then the video makes some alarming points. It talks about Chinese tech hidden in U.S. infrastructure, things like solar panels, port cranes.
With kill switches.
Yeah, exactly. Potential remote shutdown from Beijing. Then there are claims about former President Biden's cognitive abilities, alleged cover-ups, the whole thing framed as America being caught in a kind of soft war with China.
Okay, that is definitely a lot. So our mission here, our deep dive, is to unpack all of that. We'll look at these specific claims, see what the analysis you shared says about them, try to understand the nuances.
And figure out what it means for you, right, as you're trying to make sense of all this information flying around.
Precisely. It's about cutting through some of that noise, trying to find the reliable bits.
So we'll tackle the kill switch idea in solar panels, the Chinese port cranes issue that Apple iOS update mentioned.
Also, the specific claims about former President Biden, the alleged cover-up, polling data, and some context the analysis brought in that wasn't even in the video.
Yeah, that's important too.
Okay, left into it, let's unpack this, starting with that big one from the video, these supposed kill switches in Chinese solar panels.
Right.
The video really presents this as like a done deal, an active threat, that Beijing can just flip a switch and turn off power to your house or the grid.
Yeah, the language is strong. Kill switch crisis makes it sound immediate, verified. Now, the analysis, when it looked into this, found some chatter, post on X from May 2025, talking about potential rogue communication devices or kill switches, but specifically in solar inverters.
Inverters, okay, explain that bit.
So inverters are crucial. They take the DC power the panels generate and switch it to AC power, the kind your home and the grid use.
Oh.
So the thinking is, if you control the inverter, you essentially control the power flow from the panels. You could shut it down.
Okay, that makes sense conceptually. Did the analysis find solid proof of these specific inverter kill switches?
Well, it found those reports on X, and they cited outlets like Reuters, the Economic Times, claiming these devices weren't documented properly and could allow remote disabling. But, and this is the key thing the analysis points out, these specific claims from the X posts, even citing those outlets, are presented in the analysis as basically inconclusive. There weren't verified primary sources provided that directly confirmed, widespread kill switches ready for Beijing to use maliciously.
So the analysis is basically saying, okay, interesting claim, but where's the concrete proof?
Exactly. It actually gives this specific claim widespread confirmed kill switches in solar panels ready for malicious use, a truth probability of about 40%.
40%, so not zero, but
not strongly supported by hard evidence in the sources we looked at. The general idea of tech supply chain vulnerabilities? Plausible. But the really dramatic video claim of active, confirmed kill switches in solar panels, the analysis says that's more like unverified reports or maybe anecdotal based on this material.
That's a really important distinction. The concept raises concerns. Sure, supply chain risks are real. But the video's specific narrative about confirmed, ready-to-go kill switches in solar panels, that part isn't backed up here.
Precisely. Now let's shift to another tech claim, one that maybe feels a bit more grounded in other things we've heard about. Chinese-made cranes at U.S. ports.
Right. The video talks about these cranes, many from ZPMC, a Chinese state-owned company, and claims they're packed with tech sensors, GPS, they upload data, and could be remotely accessed. Part of this soft war infiltration idea.
And the analysis confirms there is a basis for concern here. There was a House hearing on cybersecurity back in 2024 that specifically discussed these ZPMC cranes. They are everywhere in U.S. ports. And yeah, outlets like the Wall Street Journal have reported on U.S. national security worries that the tech in the cranes could potentially be used for spying, maybe even sabotage, disrupting port operations.
So the tech exists, U.S. officials are worried, and the cranes are definitely dominant in our ports. That's all factual.
Correct.
How does the analysis evaluate the video's framing, though? This idea of an active soft war risk?
It gives this one a higher probability, 70%. That reflects that, yes, the advanced tech is real, the official U.S. concerns are credible.
Okay.
But it also notes the video's, let's say, alarmist tone might be overstating the immediate proven risk based only on these sources. The analysis didn't find documented cases of actual remote malicious exploitation presented as a kill switch for sabotage within the materials it reviewed. The potential vulnerability, though, that's acknowledged.
Got it. So it's a credible potential vulnerability, a real security concern officials are talking about.
Yes.
But the leap to saying they're already being used as active kill switches in a soft war, that goes beyond what the analysis found evidence for in these sources. Potential versus proven.
Exactly. Potential risk versus proven malicious use in this material. Okay, another tech claim that urgent Apple iOS 18.5 update.
Yeah, the video implied this was rushed out specifically because of vulnerabilities China could exploit, right? Kind of questioning Apple's motive.
It called it an emergency alert, suggesting Apple was maybe patching something they should have caught earlier before China could jump on it.
So what did the analysis say about that?
More skeptical here. Probability of truth assigned was only 30%.
30%, low.
Yeah. It found basically no specific evidence in the reviewed sources connecting that particular iOS update specifically to a Chinese exploit. Apple pushes out updates all the time, sometimes urgently, for security flaws. They often don't give super granular details, partly so attackers don't get a roadmap.
So the analysis thinks the video just took a routine, if urgent, update and speculatively linked it to China.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It points out, look, Apple does rely heavily on Chinese supply chains, that's true. And that raises general questions about hardware security.
Sure.
But there were no reports found in these sources directly tying iOS 18.5 to a specific China issue in the dramatic way the video claimed. It seems like the video connected those dots without direct evidence from the provided material.
Okay. Moving away from the tech hardware itself, the video makes some pretty strong claims about former President Biden, his cognitive state, administration actions.
Oh yeah, it talks about alleged Secret Service leaks, claims about him getting lost in a White House closet. Really specific stuff.
Wow. And using that plus claims about him signing orders unknowingly, like the LNG export pause.
Right, presenting it as national security level incompetence, even pure cognitive collapse. Strong words.
Very strong. What did the analysis find on those specific points?
Well, it acknowledges the narrative about Biden's cognitive state is definitely out there, often pushed by political opponents. And yes, some public appearances have raised questions for some people. But that specific anecdote about getting lost in a closet, the analysis says there's no credible sourcing for that in the material provided. It sounds more like, hyperbole, probably originating from partisan sources. No verified Secret Service leaks confirming that were found in credible outlets reviewed.
Okay, so that specific story seems unsupported. What about the claim he signed the LNG export pause order without understanding it?
Right, the analysis confirms the order itself is real. The Biden administration did pause new liquefied natural gas exports for review back in February 2021.
Okay.
And critics, like those maybe echoed in the video's narrative, have argued that this move could potentially benefit Russia by limiting Europe's energy choices. That's a policy debate.
Sure, that's policy. But him not knowing he signed it?
The analysis says there's just no evidence in these sources that President Biden was unaware of signing the actual order. That claim seems purely speculative, likely tied into the broader narrative about his age and competence, not based on anything verifiable about the signing itself.
Okay, so the order is real, the policy debate is real, but the specific anecdotes getting lost, signing unaware the analysis flags those as unsubstantiated, probably partisan shots.
Exactly. That whole cluster of claims about cognitive state in those specific stories gets a low 20% probability of truth from the analysis, mainly due to the lack of credible sourcing for the extreme examples and the speculative nature of others, like the signing claim. It shows how these unverified anecdotes get used to build a political case.
Right. The video also alleges a Biden administration cover-up regarding these infrastructure vulnerabilities, cyber attacks from China, Russia.
Yeah, it claims silence from the White House, no big national address, no alerts, suggesting they thought admitting a compromise was worse than actually being hacked.
So a deliberate hiding of the facts. What does the analysis say?
The analysis gives this claim a 50% probability, sort of a maybe. It confirms, yes, U.S. infrastructure has faced cyber attacks. Reports from the FBI, from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they acknowledge state-backed hacking attempts from places like China and Russia. There was a 2024 CISA report noting critical infrastructure vulnerabilities.
So the underlying threats are real and officially acknowledged.
Yes, but the cover-up part. The analysis says there's no evidence in the sources provided of a deliberate administration cover-up. The video's claim of total silence seems like an exaggeration to the analysis. The administration did put out cybersecurity advisories and warnings.
Just maybe not a prime-time Oval Office address.
Right, and the analysis suggests not doing a huge public announcement could be a strategic choice, maybe to avoid causing widespread panic, rather than proof of hiding something sinister.
Okay, so the threats and vulnerabilities are factual, warnings were issued, but the specific narrative of a deliberate, malicious cover-up that doesn't seem supported by direct evidence in these sources. You could argue about the communication strategy, perhaps, but that's different from a cover-up based on this.
Exactly. Now, interesting thing, the analysis you sent over also brought in some related context that wasn't even in the source video.
Oh, what's that?
China's social credit system.
Ah, right. I've read about that. How does that connect here? Why bring it up?
Well, the analysis points out that this system, which has been around since 2014, is very real. It collects massive amounts of data on Chinese citizens, what they buy, where they go, online activity, even traffic tickets.
And assigns them scores that affect their lives, right? Jobs, travel, loans.
Exactly. It's a huge state-run digital surveillance and control mechanism inside China.
Okay.
The analysis highlights its omission from the video as notable because the system's very existence demonstrates China's proven capacity for large-scale data collection, surveillance, and centralized control using technology. Now, the analysis found no evidence in these sources that this specific system is being exported or used to directly threaten U.S. liberty via things like solar panels or cranes.
Right.
But it serves as a really powerful context. It shows China's capability and how they use tech for social engineering and control domestically. It adds another layer to the concerns about tech infiltration, even if a direct threat from that system to the U.S. wasn't evidenced here.
So even if the social credit system isn't the kill switch in U.S. infrastructure, the fact that it exists in China makes the hypothetical fears the video raises about tech infiltration and control seem, well, it grounds them in a certain reality about China's capabilities.
That seems to be the angle the analysis takes. It demonstrates an established capacity for tech-driven control, which resonates with the types of fears expressed in the video, even if the specific applications aren't proven in these sources. The analysis rates the direct threat of the social credit system itself to U.S. liberty very low, 20%, based on the lack of evidence of it being applied here, but it sees it as important background.
Got it. Context. Okay, finally, the video also gets into the political side, citing polling data showing low public confidence in Democratic leadership, even among Democrats themselves.
Yeah, the video uses those numbers to argue there's been a collapse in public trust, that people are done with the current or former administration.
And it also mentioned Chuck Todd, formerly of NBC, claiming he admitted the media ran cover for someone unfit for office.
The analysis flags these as examples of how partisan narratives are woven into the discussion. The video uses the polling claims, media figure claim, to really hammer home its overall political point of view. The analysis ultimately sees the video as mixing some potentially plausible concerns with, frankly, a lot of alarmist language, unverified stories, and clear partisan framing.
Which, from the analysis's perspective, kind of weakens the credibility of some of the main claims because that verified primary source evidence often isn't there.
Exactly. And the video wraps up with a very strong call for action accountability. A full investigation into Chinese tech here, and a call for a specific kind of leadership, explicitly mentioning former President Trump.
Right, tying it all together into a specific political conclusion.
Precisely. It reflects the video's clear agenda and desired outcome for tackling these perceived problems.
Okay, so we've done this deep dive looking at the source video's claims and the analysis provided.
Yeah, and we've seen some concerns the video raises do have a basis in credible reports cited by the analysis, like the security questions around Chinese-made port cranes and their tech, the sensors, the GPS, the data links. Those are real concerns shared by the government.
But crucially, the analysis didn't find evidence of actual malicious use or exploitation documented in the sources we reviewed.
Right. And general cyber threats to U.S. infrastructure from countries like China and Russia, also acknowledged as real in reports the analysis cited. But the specific idea of a deliberate administration cover-up, the analysis found no direct evidence for that here.
Then there were the other claims, often the more dramatic ones.
Like the specific kill switches in solar panels ready to be flipped by Beijing, or those anecdotes about former President Biden getting lost or signing the LNG order unknowingly.
The analysis tagged those as lacking verified primary sources or sounding like partisan exaggerations or just speculation based on the material provided.
And the analysis also brought in that important context about the Chinese social credit system. Not something the video covered, but it highlights China's existing real-world capacity for intense surveillance and control using tech. It adds a different kind of weight to the discussion about tech infiltration and liberty, even if it's not a direct threat shown in these sources.
And that source video clearly ends with its own call for investigation, accountability, and specific leadership, which the analysis points out aligns with its overall partisan perspective.
Yeah.
What really stands out from this is how these narratives get built. You take some real, valid concerns about technology, about infrastructure vulnerability.
Which are legitimate issues.
Right, and then they get woven together with political arguments, with claims that, according to the analysis, lack solid verification in the sources provided. It becomes this really complex mix.
Absolutely. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, you, the listener, are constantly faced with this stuff, sorting through claims about national security, a reliance on global tech, questions about leaders' capabilities.
So it really leaves you with a critical question, doesn't it? Given this blend, we often see credible concerns mixed with unsubstantiated claims and clear political framing. How do you effectively assess the actual level of threat? How do you judge the trustworthiness of the different stories being told? Especially when technology, security, and politics collide in these really complicated and sometimes pretty alarming ways. How do you find your footing?